The courtroom froze the moment the defendant leaned back and smirked at the judge, as if the entire justice system were nothing more than an inconvenience. But when the judge learned the identity of the man this young defendant had assaulted, the entire room braced for a reckoning no one expected. The old wooden benches of Municipal Courtroom 3 were packed shoulder to shoulder, every eye fixed on the young man seated at the defendant's table. Evan Riker, 22, college dropout, notorious for late-night street racing, sat with an air of untouchable superiority, his chin tilted upward, his shoulders sprawled arrogantly. One leg bounced against the floor in restless boredom, as if even being in court insulted him. A faint smirk kept returning to his face, curling with the confidence of someone who believed the world could never truly hold him accountable. But what struck everyone most wasn't his attitude. It was the last name, Riker. The son of Police Chief Daniel Riker, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the city. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras lowered only because Judge Caprio had not yet entered. Whispered speculation rippled like electricity through the room. Even the bailiffs, normally stoic, exchanged uneasy glances. This was no ordinary hearing, and everyone knew it. Across the aisle, the victim sat quietly, Mr. Harold Quinn, a 68-year-old Marine veteran. He wore a pressed button-down shirt, sleeves neatly rolled, his posture upright despite the stiffness age brought. His silver hair was trimmed precisely, hinting at decades of discipline. Faint bruising still shadowed his jawline, evidence of the assault that had drawn the city's attention. But what defined him most wasn't the injury, it was his presence. Calm, dignified, composed, Harold did not glare, he did not tremble. He simply waited, hands folded gently in his lap, as if he had stood in rooms far more intimidating than this one, and he had 2 tours. Countless lives guided as a history teacher for over 30 years, volunteer mentor at the community center where he spent several evenings each week helping troubled teens find purpose. He was the sort of man whose character needed no defense. Evan glanced at him once, just once, and scoffed under his breath. Before the story dove even deeper, the narrator would have paused to address the viewers watching this unfold. Before I tell you how the judge reacts to that smirk, tell me in the comments. Do you think arrogance like this deserves the maximum penalty? The tension in the room seemed to thicken when the door behind the bench opened. I'll rise for the Honorable Judge Frank Caprio. The crowd stood, shifting, murmuring. Everyone rose, everyone except Evan. He remained seated, tapping his phone screen until his public defender nudged him sharply. Only then did he drag himself upright, rolling his eyes as if the entire ritual bored him. Judge Caprio walked to his seat with calm authority. His presence wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. The respect he earned came from decades of fairness, compassion, and uncompromising integrity. He studied the room with quiet observation before taking his seat. "You may be seated," he said. The room lowered gently. But immediately, the judge's eyes locked onto Evan, the one man who had risen late. A subtle crease formed between his brows. He didn't speak on it, yet, but the courtroom felt it, that shift in energy when a judge makes a silent note. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is the arraignment of Evan Riker. The defendant is charged with assaulting Mr. Harold Quinn outside the Cedar Grove Community Center on Friday evening." Judge Caprio nodded once. "Very well. Proceed." The prosecutor described the scene. Evan's modified sports car screeching into the parking lot, nearly striking a group of veterans leaving an event. Harold stepping forward, calmly asking him to slow down. Evan responding not with words but with anger, shoving the elderly man, then striking him when he stumbled. As the prosecutor spoke, the judge watched Evan's expression carefully. The young man didn't flinch, didn't blink. If anything, his smirk deepened, as though these words were nothing more than an inconvenience he'd soon laugh about. That's when the narrator would lean closer to viewers again. Have you ever seen someone treat a courtroom like this? Comment below, because what you're about to hear next changes everything. Harold sat still as the account unfolded, and when the prosecutor gestured toward him, the veteran simply offered a respectful nod. He hadn't exaggerated anything. He hadn't demanded special treatment. He had merely given his statement, and shown up today with the same quiet dignity he'd shown his entire life. Judge Caprio shifted his attention. "Mr. Quinn, thank you for being here this morning. Your presence is appreciated." Harold nodded again but remained silent, a reflection of humility rooted in military discipline. Evan exhaled dramatically as though the proceedings were taking too long. His fingers drummed against the table. His knee bounced again. At one point he even whispered something under his breath, likely an insult, earning a warning glance from his attorney. The judge caught it. He said nothing, but those who knew him understood. He was observing everything. Finally, Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Riker, do you understand the charges against you?" Evan shrugged. "Yeah, whatever." The entire courtroom reacted, a ripple of disbelief. Several veterans seated in support of Harold straightened in their seats, jaws tightening. Judge Caprio did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence alone carried the weight of a gavel strike. "Your demeanor is noted," he said simply. The prosecutor continued, presenting preliminary evidence that would later be expanded in the next hearing. Judge Caprio listened carefully, expression unreadable. Then, turning once more to viewers beyond the story, the narrator would ask, "Like this video if you believe veterans deserve respect, especially from the people they once protected." Toward the end of the hearing, tension filled every inch of space. Evan's arrogance was now undeniable, Harold's integrity unmistakable, and Judge Caprio's patience wearing thin. But the storm was only beginning, because what would happen in the next moments, and the next appearances, would leave the city talking for years. And justice was about to take a direction no one expected. The next hearing drew an even larger crowd. By the time the clock above the courtroom door struck 9, every bench was full. Additional chairs had been brought in along the side walls. Local news had already run the headline the night before. Police chief's son accused of assaulting decorated veteran, Judge Caprio presides. People weren't just curious anymore. They were invested. They wanted to see whether the law would bend for power or stand firm for justice. "I'll rise." Once again everyone stood as Judge Frank Caprio entered. This time, Evan Riker rose on time, but only because his attorney tugged at his sleeve before the bailiff even finished announcing the judge. Evan's expression was unchanged, still that half-bored, half-amused smirk, like all of this was beneath him. The judge sat. "You may be seated." The courtroom settled, a heavy silence falling like a curtain. Today was different. Today, the evidence would speak. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, the state would like to present security footage from the Cedar Grove Community Center parking lot, capturing the incident in question." Judge Caprio nodded. "Proceed." The lights dimmed slightly as the TV cart was wheeled forward. A flat screen faced the courtroom. The bailiff connected the laptop, and a frozen image appeared. The front of the community center, dusk settling in, several people standing near the entrance. "Play it," the judge instructed. The footage rolled. Evan's car appeared from the right side of the frame. Modified sports car. Low to the ground, engine clearly roaring even though the audio was faint. The car shot into the parking lot far too fast, cutting diagonally across spaces, forcing two pedestrians to step back quickly. On the screen, Harold Quinn stepped into view. Even in the grainy footage, his stance was calm, not aggressive. He raised his hand, palm outward in a universal, slow-down gesture. The car screeched to a halt inches from a parking barrier. Evan jumped out, slamming the door. His body language was loud, aggressive. He walked right up to Harold, his arms wide, chest out, jaw moving rapidly as he shouted. The audio couldn't pick up much, but the anger was clear. Then it happened. As Harold pointed calmly back toward the pedestrians, Evan shoved him. Hard. Harold stumbled back. On the screen, several people turned toward the commotion. Harold regained his footing, hands raised, not in aggression but in a calming motion. Evan stepped forward again. This time it was a punch, clean to the jaw. Harold fell sideways to the pavement, his shoulder striking the ground first, then his head. Gas rippled across the real courtroom, and there, in the middle of it all, was Evan, on the footage, standing over the fallen veteran for a moment before someone rushed between them. The video paused on that frame, Harold on the ground, strangers bending down to help, Evan's posture still radiating anger and defiance. In the front row, Harold remained motionless, watching his own assault being replayed like a scene in a movie he never auditioned for. Back at the defense table, Evan snickered. The sound was small, but in that silence, it might as well have been an explosion. He leaned toward his friend sitting behind him in the gallery and whispered, a smirk curling his mouth. "He shouldn't have gotten in my way." He didn't realize his voice carried. The nearest veteran in the row behind Harold's supporters clenched his fists. A woman in a business suit shook her head, eyes narrowing. The prosecutor heard it. The judge heard it. Judge Caprio tapped his pen once on the bench. "Mr. Riker," he said, his voice calm but edged with warning, "I would strongly advise you to treat these proceedings with the seriousness they deserve." Evan shrugged, but he stopped laughing. "If you were watching this unfold online, this is where you'd be asked. Have you ever seen this level of disrespect in a courtroom? Comment below if you think this attitude is part of the problem." The prosecutor cleared his throat and continued. "Your Honor, as you saw, the incident was unprovoked. Mr. Quinn merely asked the defendant to slow down to protect pedestrians in the lot." He handed a folder to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. "Here are the medical reports. Mr. Quinn suffered a mild concussion, a dislocated shoulder, and multiple contusions. At his age, these injuries are far more serious than they might appear." Judge Caprio flipped through the documents, his expression darkening. The prosecutor then turned toward Harold. Mr. Quinn, would you please take the stand? Harold stood slowly, joints stiff, but his posture remained straight. He took the oath, then sat folding his hands carefully. The prosecutor approached with a softened tone. Mr. Quinn, can you tell the court why you approached Mr. Riker that evening? Harold glanced toward the judge, then toward Evan, then back to the prosecutor. There were families leaving the center, he said, his voice steady, carrying a faint rasp of age and experience, some of them with small children. His car came in too fast. I was afraid someone might get hurt, so I stepped forward and asked him to slow down. That's all. Did you threaten him? Use profanity? Lay a hand on him? No, Harold said firmly. I didn't curse. Didn't touch him. I just told him, hey son, slow it down. People here have already seen enough danger in their lives. A few veterans in the gallery nodded knowingly. The prosecutor continued, Mr. Quinn, could you briefly share your background with the court? Harold hesitated, as if unused to talking about himself. Finally, he obliged. I enlisted at 19, he said. I served 2 tours overseas. Came home, went to college on the GI Bill. Taught middle school history for 32 years. After retiring, I started volunteering at the Cedar Grove Community Center. We run programs for teens, especially the kids who feel lost or angry. He paused, his eyes momentarily landing on Evan. I've spent a lot of time trying to help young men like him find direction before their anger hurts somebody. Or themselves. The courtroom absorbed his words like a collective echo. If you were watching, this is when you'd hear. Like this video if you believe men like Mr. Quinn deserve the highest level of respect. The prosecutor nodded. Did you harbor any ill will toward the defendant? Harold shook his head. No. I'm disappointed, saddened. But I don't hate him. Hate never fixed anything. Well, thank you, Mr. Quinn. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Judge Caprio studied the elderly man carefully. It was clear Harold had no desire for revenge. He didn't exaggerate, didn't dramatize. His dignity was the loudest thing in the room. When the defense attorney declined to cross-examine, the judge dismissed Harold from the stand. The veteran stepped down carefully and returned to his seat. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Mr. Riker, he began, I have now seen the footage and heard from your victim. Your reaction in this courtroom does not inspire confidence that you grasp the seriousness of your actions. Evan rolled his eyes again, but this time the tremor in his jaw betrayed a flicker of unease. The judge wasn't done. This court will take a short recess, Judge Caprio said, his tone controlled but cool. But when we return, we will discuss bail conditions and next steps. In the meantime, I suggest you think very carefully about the kind of man you are choosing to be. He struck the give all once. As people began to stand, the narrator would turn back to you. I subscribe if you stand with accountability, because what happens after this recess will prove whether justice bends for power or stands for what's right. The stage was set. The evidence was undeniable. What no one knew yet was who would walk through those courtroom doors next. The courtroom doors opened just as the bailiff announced the end of recess. People filed back into their seats, whispering about the security footage they'd just witnessed. But before anyone had fully settled, another presence appeared in the doorway, one that instantly changed the temperature of the room. Police Chief Daniel Riker. A wave of stunned silence rolled across the crowd. Conversations. Several reporters who had been packing away their equipment scrambled to turn their cameras back on. Veterans straightened in their seats, recognizing the man responsible for much of the city's law enforcement integrity. He was the kind of man who carried authority in the way he walked. Steady, deliberate, sober. Evan, seated at the defense table, brightened for the first time. His eyes widened with relief. He sat up straighter, confidence returning in an instant. He even smiled, certain that rescue had finally arrived. Judge Caprio watched it all unfold, expression unreadable. The chief approached the bench. Your Honor, he said quietly, and may I address the court? Daniel turned not to the judge, not to the prosecutor, but to his son. Evan, he said, voice controlled. Stand up. Evan rose, hands stuffed into his pockets. He tried to look casual, but there was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. What happened next belonged in every viral courtroom reel ever made. Daniel took a slow breath. I saw the footage, he said, all of it. Evan shrugged. At that, it wasn't a stop. Daniel's voice cut clean through the room. But before you say another word, listen to me. Every spectator leaned forward. Yes, if you were watching this on screen, this would be the moment the narrator asked. But before I tell you exactly what his father says, type justice in the comments if you're still following the story. Daniel stepped closer. You think my uniform protects you? You think my position shields you? You think the law bends because your last name is Riker? Evan blinked. Shocked that ends today. The silence was absolute. Real men take responsibility. Evan's smirk vanished completely. Daniel's next words hit even harder. You assaulted a veteran. A man who served this country before you were even born. A man who has done more for this community than you've ever attempted. And instead of remorse, you laughed. A few spectators nodded, murmuring. Evan swallowed hard. Daniel pointed toward Harold, who sat quietly in the front row. You don't deserve this man's forgiveness yet, and you certainly don't deserve special treatment from this court. His voice shook just slightly, just enough for the room to feel the weight of a father whose heart had been breaking quietly for years. I won't protect you from this, Daniel said. I shouldn't protect you from this. Judge Caprio let the silence settle before he spoke. Chief Riker, thank you. Your words carry the weight of integrity. Daniel stepped back, taking a seat behind the prosecutor, far from his son. Evan's shoulders sagged, abandoned by the very man he thought would shield him. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Mr. Riker, your father's presence does not influence my decision. His words hold truth, and you need to hear truth today. He turned slightly toward the gallery. This court stands for accountability, fairness, and the belief that people can change if they are willing. Then he looked straight at Evan. You have shown arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect not only toward the victim, but toward this entire courtroom. Evan lowered his eyes. Judge Caprio reached for the sentencing document, but did not lift the gavel yet. But before I pass judgment, Mr. Quinn, do you wish to speak? Harold rose slowly. Your Honor, I don't want revenge. He looked at Evan, who couldn't quite meet his gaze. I want him to understand the harm he caused, to grow from it. I've taught thousands of young men. Some were angry, some were lost, but all of them deserved a chance to become better. He paused gently. So does he. The room softened at Harold's humility, though Evan's shame deepened. Judge Caprio nodded. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Then he delivered the sentence. Mr. Riker, you will serve 300 hours of community service at the Cedar Grove Veterans Outreach Center. You will attend mandatory anger management counseling, submit a public apology at the community event you disrupted, pay full restitution for medical costs, and follow all probationary terms without exception. Evan stiffened. 300 hours. At each, the judge raised a hand. Evan swallowed the rest of his protest. Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward. This is not about punishment. This is about transformation. You will spend time with the very people you disrespected. You will listen to their stories. You will rebuild what you damaged, not just physically, but morally. He let the words sink in. Your father cannot save you. I cannot save you. Only you can choose who you become next. Evan's breathing trembled. His eyes reddened, jaw tight as reality finally settled around him like cold iron. Chief Riker watched, pain visible but unwavering. Harold sat quietly, perhaps the only person in the room who already believed the young man could change. Evan lowered into his seat, face in his hands. Not anger this time. Not defiance, but the overwhelming beginning of humility. If you were watching, this is where you'd hear the narrator say, "Would you have issued a harsher sentence? Let me know below." As bailiffs prepared to escort Evan out to process the terms, Judge Caprio spoke a final line that would replay endlessly online. Justice isn't about crushing a young man's future. It's about giving him a reason to build a better one. The gavel struck. The hearing closed. The story of Evan Riker was far from over, but for the first time, the path ahead wasn't arrogance. It was change. 8 to 9 months passed. The seasons changed, the city changed, and slowly but undeniably, even Riker changed. The first weeks of community service had been rough. Veterans at the outreach center kept their distance, unimpressed by the police chief's son. Evan showed up angry, embarrassed, and unwilling to admit he deserved any of it. But time has a way of breaking down the walls arrogance builds. Began the day he was assigned to clean an old storage room cluttered with donated gear. A veteran named Lewis, quiet, sharp-eyed, walked in and tossed him a broom. "No one here cares who your father is," Lewis said. We care what kind of man you decide to be. For the first time, Evan listened. And listening turned into learning. He heard stories of soldiers who lost friends but kept fighting. Stories of men who came home only to battle nightmares worse than war. Stories of survivors who rebuilt their lives from nothing but grit, discipline, and humility. Stories that made his own anger feel small. Soon, Evan wasn't just completing hours. He was volunteering extra shifts. He helped with meal prep, set up events, repaired a damaged wheelchair ramp, and even organized a fundraiser for PTSD support programs. The veterans stopped seeing him as a problem and started seeing him as a kid who was finally growing up. If you were watching this online, the narrator would say, "A comment growth if you believe people can change." One afternoon in early spring, as sunshine warmed the sidewalks, Evan stood outside the center cleaning paint rollers when he saw Harold Quinn approaching. Evan froze. Harold walked with steady steps, his posture as proud as ever. He stopped a few feet away, hands tucked calmly into his jacket pockets. "I've been hearing good things," Harold said. Evan swallowed. I don't deserve your kindness." And Harold said softly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Quinn. Truly. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to make sure it never happens again." Harold nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." The veteran extended his hand. Evan stared at it for a moment, then took it, gripping it firmly, not out of pride, but out of gratitude. It was the handshake that marked the true beginning of his redemption. Later that year, a letter arrived at Judge Caprio's chambers, neatly written, honest, humble. "Her Honor, thank you for giving me the sentence that saved my life. I didn't need leniency. I needed direction." Judge Caprio read the letter twice before setting it down with a thoughtful smile. Justice had done what it was meant to do. Not break a young man, but rebuild one. And outside the courthouse, Evan continued helping veterans, continued attending counseling, continued becoming someone his father wasn't afraid to be proud of. Someone Harold could look at with respect, someone the community no longer whispered about but welcomed. Before the narrator closed the story, they turned to you one last time. If you believe accountability can turn lives around like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and tell me in the comments what lesson you're taking away today. And with that, the courtroom saga of Evan Riker came to its final redemptive close.